Welcome to our webinar on the Design Your Own Fellowships process for the 2027 application cycle. We're going to provide a little overview of the process. My name is Al Roberts. I'm Senior Manager of Recruitment and Enrollment at Equal Justice Works, and I'm joined by my colleague, Lauren. If you want to give just a brief introduction.
Sure, yeah. So I'm Lauren Hartley. I'm the Associate Director of Network Engagement here at Equal Justice Works. I've been here about 4 years. And in my role, I support all of our fellows in the DYO Fellowship Program generally. I also work a bit with our other stakeholders like our law schools, our law school career advisors, and our alumni. I support the whole team, but I do focus in particular on kind of in the Northeast, so particularly in New York and Boston. And I went to law school to be a public interest law student myself, a public interest lawyer. I practiced a little bit of immigration law. So it's great to be at Equal Justice Works, where I get to support all of our fellows who are doing this.
Awesome. Thank you again all for being here. With that, I think we can dive into our presentation. So just a little overview of our agenda today. We'll be giving an overview of Equal Justice Works, a little bit about our mission, an overview of the Design Your Own Fellowships program, also dive into why you might consider a fellowship, and then the sort of design of the fellowship and putting together that notion and idea that you have, and that leads right into how to submit that idea to us in a strong application. And then we'll go into a little bit of what's next on the horizon and provide time for Q&A. And at any time, you can utilize the Q&A feature of Zoom to submit questions. I recommend you use that feature. We'll also be monitoring the chat if you decide to drop a question in there. Next slide, please. So Equal Justice Works, our mission. We create opportunities for lawyers to transform their passion for equal justice into a lifelong commitment to public service. And we do that through our 2-year fellowship programs. And Design Your Own Fellowships is one of the programs. If we move to the next slide, we're here primarily to talk about Design Your Own Fellowships, but of course, Equal Justice Works at large. We are the largest postgraduate legal fellowship program in the country. We also offer law student summer programs and resources on student debt. And we're proud to have over 180 member law schools across the nation who are members of the Equal Justice Works family. And since our inception, we're actually getting ready to celebrate our 40th anniversary as an organization, but we're proud to report that we've enabled more than 2,800 fellowships in that time. And 85% of those fellows remain in public service after their fellowship ends, which is a really proud stat that we have. Next slide, please. And then just to get into a little bit of the diversity of our programs, we have sort of 2 tracks for program design, our cohort fellowship programs and our Design Your Own Fellowship program. And now today we're really focusing on the Design Your Own Fellowships program, the application process. But I just wanted to, for your awareness, to sort of convey what the cohort program is. Cohort programs are designed around a common issue area. So we have a variety of different programs right now. We have a housing justice program, a disaster resilience program, so on and so forth. And all of the fellows in that program are sort of focused on a common deliverable around an issue. And in that program, folks are selected or interviewed directly by host organizations, legal services organizations, the employer of record. And those sort of opportunities are more ad hoc, and they come available as funding becomes available throughout the course of the year. So you'll see opportunities posted to our website where you can apply directly to a legal services organization to become a fellow through one of these cohort programs. We have a few, I think we have 4 actual fellowship programs right now that we're actively recruiting for. in California and Texas. So please do check our website for that. I'll drop in the chat in a moment links to those positions. Um, but just a little general overview of the cohort programs. For the remainder of time, we're going to be focused on design your own fellowships. This is a project-based, and we are sort of an annual cycle that we operate our design your own fellowships program. And so right now we're in the applications period. Applications opened in May. They'll be open through September 17th this year. And applicants will be working with legal services organizations, host organizations, to design a project and apply as a Rising 3L. Obviously, a lot of our fellows are recent graduates. It's not exclusive to recent graduates, but you can check our sort of the criteria of eligibility to become a fellow on our website through our applicant guide. So recommend you review that. We'll also talk a little bit about it in a bit. And so those interviews are conducted by us, Equal Justice Works, as we're attempting to pair your project, the submitted project by the applicant, to an interested sponsor who's interested in funding that work, that issue area, or just serving a certain geography. And with that, we're going to really dive into the Design Your Own Fellowships overview, and I'm going to pass things over to Lauren.
Great. Thank you, Al. Yeah, very happy to be talking about it today. So to give you an idea of what our classes numbers like we said, we have the largest public interest fellowship program in the country historically. Our recent classes of fellows, the last 2 years, so the class of 25 and the class of 2026, we've ended up placing 60 fellows, which we're very proud of. We hope to place a similar number in our next class going forward, but see how that shakes out. Those fellows, a little bit about them, they are all over the country. So the class of 2026, that they'll be starting in September. They'll be serving in 21 different states, plus the District of Columbia and cities all over those states. They do come to us from 35 different law schools, and they'll be at 54 different host organizations. And between them, they have 61 different sponsors. So a lot of different things happening in that class. If you check on our website, you can see some of our fellows by prior class year. Our 2026s are not quite published yet. They're starting in September, and so they'll be published soon. But you can search prior fellows here. I really encourage you to check this out if you haven't done it already. And you can look at fellows who maybe were doing work in a similar issue area, or you can see if there's folks who have gone to your law school that have been fellows, or are wanting to work in a particular city or at a particular host organization. To give you an example of one of these profiles that you'll see on this website, like what is an Equal Justice Works Fellowship, it's these different components that we're going to get into. And it's a candidate combining doing work with a host organization to do specific specialized work that no one else is doing. So here's a fellow that I worked with fairly recently, Courtney Bernard. She was a fellow in the class of 2023. She'd gone to Georgetown Law here in Washington, D.C., which is where I'm also based. And she worked with the Georgetown Health Justice Alliance, which is a medical legal partnership, and their P-Law project is called their Perinatal Law Project. And this is somewhere she had interned when she was a law student. And here in DC, there's a relatively new law around benefits for maternal health. So women who are expecting or have recently given birth. And in DC, also some paid family leave, which is great. One of the few jurisdictions in the country that has that. But it's pretty new, and a lot of folks are having trouble accessing those benefits. So she partnered with a health provider here in DC that serves a lot of our lower income families and neighborhoods, and made sure that those clients that they saw were getting access to the benefits that they were entitled to. So she did direct representation. She did a lot of training for healthcare professionals to help them learn how to refer folks on the law and to give them information about the law. She ended up testifying before City Council, either in person or through written testimony, 6 different times on what was happening with the law and what changes might be needed or related issues. And she also developed a research tool for her host organization to be able to go back and look at this area of work, again, pretty new for them. So being able to analyze how the cases were going and what it would look like going And she was able to stay on. There's a staff attorney at her organization and continues that work today. So that's just one example, and there are many more on our website. So why would you apply for a fellowship? So many folks talk about it as the ability to design a dream job right out of law school. I was a public interest law student, and it can be tough. The public interest job market can be tough to break into. There's not as many entry-level positions as we would like there to be. So it's an opportunity to design a job that is a thing that you want to do at an organization that you want to do it at, with the people that you want to work with. You get to participate in our learning and networking if you become a fellow. So we have a few different components of that. Every year, our fellows come to Washington, D.C. for an event we call Leadership Development Training for many years. It actually is a new name. It's the Fellow Summit now, but it's several days of professional development and learning with all of the fellows from across the country. Many of the times our alumni are involved in that. Our Alumni Advisory Council is always involved in that. And then there's also other learning and networking that happens throughout the year. So for example, about once a month, there is a webinar that our learning and networking director puts together. And there's other benefits as well. So the National Institute of Trial Advocacy, for example, is putting on a free trial advocacy training for our fellows later this summer. And that's something folks get to do for free as part of our fellowship program. We also offer loan repayment assistance. If you have student loans that you're working on, we have a program for that. And thinking about your host organization, it means you as the fellow are a full-time employee of your host organization, and you get the same sort of kind of status and other benefits as other similar employees. So really a way to create an entry-level job for yourself. I am going to talk about 4 different kind of key components of our fellowships. So those are the project, the candidate, the host organization, and our sponsors. A lot of these components are the same for any kind of project-based fellowship. So if you know the SCADN program, or sometimes other school-funded fellowships are project-based components, or project-based fellowships. They're all a little bit unique. Going through some of these eligibility guidelines, we're going to talk about each of them in turn, and then we'll answer some questions. So to be an eligible candidate, you do need to be a graduate of a member law school by September 2027 with a JD or an LLM, and be able to do the work of an attorney at that organization. You also do need to have work authorization. So typically that means our program is typically not a great fit for international students because you do need to have work eligibility for those full 2 years. To be eligible, you can be coming from a clerkship. You can be coming from a short-term fellowship, or sort of like a bridge fellowship is what some people will call it, or part-time work. But the goal is to launch new careers in public interest. So if you've already had a full-time job as a permanent job as a public interest attorney, you would not be eligible. And then no participation in other major fellowship programs like the SCADN program or et cetera. If you have any questions about these criteria, you can email our fellowships inbox. It's fellowships@equaljusticeworks.org. And you can ask if you've got questions there. I'll also note we do not require transcripts or GPA or class rank as part of our program. So there's no academic requirements as part of the eligibility. Really what we are looking for is folks who are committed, have a demonstrated commitment to public interest, and you've got the background and the skills to carry out the work you want to do, right? So that's really what we're looking for. To talk about that project, the work that you want to do, the project needs to serve an underserved population and address an unmet need or an underaddressed legal issue. We don't have a lot of things that we don't do. So we don't do projects that are like standard criminal defense, so public defender work, and we don't do projects that are in international law. Other than that, we're open to them. We have had many projects over the years and all sorts of different work, which again, you can find, on our website. The basic criteria is that it needs to be innovative and that it's not being done already, right? So it needs to be different than like a staff attorney position that's already happening at the organization. And, it should be designed to have lasting impact. Projects can be a combination of direct representation, impact litigation, policy, community education, coalition building. Basically all of them are a combination of those things. So you'll see again on our website lots of different examples. And then the keys here, again, distinctive from a staff attorney position. We are looking for it to be, ambitious yet feasible. So what's something you can do in 2 years? Sometimes we get projects that are really, really incredibly ambitious. I had one a few years ago that was basically like, I'm going to solve asylum law by litigating in front of the First Circuit. And as someone with an immigration law background, I loved the ambition, but honestly, it just was not very realistic for a project that could be completed by a new attorney within 2 years. And we also are looking for, showing that there's going to be something that it will be sustainable at the host organization. So, the fellow might not stay on as a staff attorney, but are there going to be resources that are left behind? Are there going to be handbooks? There's going to be training, things that are going to be left behind in that. And what's the new ad that is bringing to that community and to that host organization? So talking about a host organization, so it does need to be a nonprofit with a legal staff. It doesn't have to be a strictly legal services provider. It could be, example, a nonprofit with a legal department. We do recommend that there are at least 2 attorneys who are providing legal services on staff of the organization because they need to be able to support and supervise new attorneys, right? So if you're thinking about who's going to be your supervisor, what if that person is sick? What if they're out for a while? You need to have that capability there. Ability to onboard you. It should be an existing organization as well. Sometimes folks ask if they can start a nonprofit to be the host. And unfortunately, our program is not quite suited for that. It does need to be a little bit more established than that. They do need to be capable of providing benefits, health insurance, office-based or remote work. The same thing that they're providing to their other staff is what they need to, similar situated staff, is what they need to be able to provide to you as the fellow and as a new attorney. So you need to have supervisors that have experience in the project area that are going to be able to supervise you. The project should make sense to be at that host organization. So related to the work that they're already doing, but helps, expand their work and really has a fit for what's happening there. Any questions about those 3 eligibility, those 3 components before I move forward?
We do have some questions in our Q&A right now about eligibility for applicants.
Yes.
And we can save this for the Q&A as well, but the eligibility, someone asks, the eligibility terms are unclear for recent graduates. What constitutes a bridge or gap fellowship for eligibility purposes?
Yeah, so there is more information about this also in our FAQ in details. So typically when we talk about a bridge or a gap fellowship, that's something that's funded for maybe a year or less through your law school, or might be something that's part-time. It's essentially not a permanent public interest attorney position or a staff attorney position. If you're in a 1-year, full school-funded fellowship next year, you're generally maintaining your eligibility.
And this one's somewhat related to eligibility too, but someone on the call here says Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, and Oregon have or pending launch of licensure pathways for graduates without bar exam requirements. How does EJW classify these grads pending full licensure that otherwise meets EJW requirements? And then specifically,
Yes.
just in
Good
Washington.
question.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Good question. I think, this is one that we haven't really dealt with before, but I think you do need to be, by the time you're beginning the project, that you need to be able to be operating as a lawyer. So that is a part of the Design Your Own Fellowships. They are designed to be done by a lawyer. And we say, JD, but the assumption also is that you are sitting for the bar exam and going to become licensed. So with one of those alternative pathways, if you're able to be licensed, around the start of the fellowship, that is the expectation that we would have. So candidates are starting in September. So typically they're, passing the bar and being licensed within the next couple months. So that's sort of the expectation, that you're able to be licensed to practice in the state or where you want to serve as the fellowship is started.
Right. I think we'll save more of the Q&A segment for later on.
Okay, yeah, we'll go on.
Fantastic.
Okay. Um, so those being the basic eligibility, I want to talk now about our sponsors. So this is something that's a bit different for our program. There are other project-based fellowships out there where some of these other components might look very similar. The sponsors are very different for Equal Justice Works. So our sponsors are law firms, corporate legal departments, foundations, and individuals who are interested in supporting this work, like access to justice and launching the careers of people going into public interest law. They are the ultimate audience for your application, and they are engaged in the fellowship throughout the whole 2 years. So they do provide financial support that helps pay the salary and goes to your organization to support you throughout the fellowship. But they also are often getting engaged in other ways, like pro bono support. So that's a really important part of our application. You'll see online. So we ask sponsors are often looking for projects where they can get involved in doing pro bono. So sometimes fellows will be doing a clinic with their sponsors, or maybe they've got a brief they're having their sponsors help on, or memos that they're working on. Sometimes they're doing know your rights materials or developing handbooks or other projects. Sometimes they can even bring other resources to bear, like getting in-house folks at a corporate, especially the corporation, to help with maybe like marketing things or data analysis. So there's some really interesting ways that folks have been able to work with their sponsors. Typically, our sponsors are looking to support very specific types of projects. We call those sponsor preferences or sponsor priorities. We will be publishing those on our website in the next couple weeks. We are getting those commitments from our sponsors right now. So as the application opened, we've also been getting our sponsors to commit. So we have a group of those with a deadline today. So we'll be publishing those priorities later. It is that list, I will tell you, is not an exclusive list. It is not all encompassing, right? So that is just some of the preferences that we know for some of the sponsors. Every year, people say like, oh, well, the thing I want to do isn't on the list. Should I apply anyway? And I always say you absolutely can. You absolutely should, if it's fitting all of sort of the other things that make for a great project. We do really have sponsors who are funding everything, all kinds of legal work across the country: veterans, children's, disability, education, healthcare, immigration, environmental, a little bit of labor employment, housing, like so many, all types of many in the criminal justice reform space, reentry, expungement, record clearing, civil rights, LGBTQ plus rights, like so many different areas. So we really encourage applications across the country and in all kinds. We did do a couple questions already, so I'm gonna keep going forward, and then we'll do more in the Q&A. I do want to talk a bit about like how you develop an application, right? So we've talked about the basic eligibility. What does it look like to design a project? So I sort of think about it in this flow. So you're going to be conceptualizing a project, thinking about what it might be. You're going to work on designing it. Then you're going to refine a review, and then you're going to submit it. Some of you may already have a host organizations you've identified, you worked with. Maybe you've already conceptualized. You're starting to design. That's great. That's a great place to be right now as you move forward. Again, for inspiration, you can check out the Fellow Archive. There's kind of high-level details on lots of different projects there. Some things to think about as you're developing your project. Of course, the expertise and mission of your host organization. Right? So why is this good fit with this host? What is their scope and the scale of their current work? So if you're proposing a project that is doing work on a national scale, are you at an organization that's done that work before? If not, how are they going to support it? Or if you are proposing to work in a totally different area or a different community than where your organization has worked before, how does that fit with what they're doing, and how is it complementary? You want to think about the impact of the project. So there's some areas where if you are focusing on direct representation, you could see hundreds of clients over the course of 2 years. There's others if you're doing more impact or research and policy, where you might really only work on 3 or 4 cases in 2 years. We've had fellows who do all of those things. But you really want to be able to articulate to the sponsors, your ultimate audience, what's the impact of the project going to be on the communities that you're proposing to work with or work for and support. How does your background, your experience, your skill set align with what you're proposing to do? Right, so we say kind of like, why are you doing this work at this organization, like right now? What in your resume makes sense and your experience makes sense with us? You also want to consider the resilience of the project and the host org. This is one that we've added recently. Unfortunately, the funding environment is very challenging right now, so we are aware of that. And there have been organizations and nonprofits that have, relied really on one source of funding, and they've ended up shutting down because that source of funding is no longer available. So if you as a candidate, I really encourage you to keep that in mind if you're looking at potential host organizations. Does the host organization have kind of a diversity of funding? Does it look like they're going to be able to support you? You really have to be thinking about 3 years ahead, right? So you're proposing the application, it's due this September, and you're proposing to start next September, and then you're going to go on for 2 years from now. So what does that look like possibly for that organization? We've also seen, of course, a lot of changes in federal law in the last couple of years, right? There's things that are being changed by executive order, Supreme Court decisions. I was just getting alerts to my phone earlier today. So if you're proposing to work on a project that relies on one specific element of federal law that's really vulnerable to change, it's like maybe highly politicized, that might be something that could change very quickly and would make it impossible to do your project or make it very difficult to do the project. So that's something to be thinking about. What are your remedies under state law? Are there different agencies that are involved? What does it look like, again, to like forecast out kind of like 3 years for what that looks like? So things like immigration and LGBTQ plus space and voting rights, those are all very like vulnerable to change. So how can you kind of think about building a resilient project? And then again, thinking about our audience. So the ultimate audience is the sponsors. They're the ones that are involved in selecting the fellows. They're deciding who they want to support and who they're going to maybe work with. They want to see presentations from or do pro bono with. Again, a lot of our sponsors are law firms, corporate legal departments, foundations, and individuals. I would say the majority are law firms and corporate legal departments. And so kind of putting yourself in those shoes. Like, I was a public interest student. I did public interest law all the way. Like, I never had a single internship, summer job in the private sector at all. All of my work was in the private sector. But now I spend a lot of my time working with sponsors and corporate legal departments who are in the private sector. So it's a little bit of a different audience that you're writing for. It's not the same as like writing an application, for an internship or for a clinic when your person is like very public interest. It's somebody who maybe cares about those things, but it's not their full-time job. So a lot of our sponsor representatives are maybe the chairs of the pro bono committee, right? Maybe they're a partner who's really committed and they might do 100 hours a year on immigration work, but it's not their full-time job. It's something they care about. But they're doing it in addition to their other responsibilities. Same thing in our corporate legal departments. So when you're writing this application, you want to make it clear on how they can plug in to the work, what the impact is going to be, and make it easy for them to talk about to their colleagues who they may want to get excited about supporting your work, and to other folks within their realm who are going to be supporting the work. So things to be thinking about. I also want to note quickly, so we are a national organization. Again, I know we have host organizations and fellows from all over the country. Do be thinking about some of the litigation that's going on in many states. If you using terms that are considered DEI, like racial justice, might be a problem. And it might mean that there are sponsors in those states that might not be able to see your application. So that's something to really think about too with your host organization. How do they talk about the work? What are the kinds of other funders, that they want to work with? I'm sure they've had to think about this too. So I'd make sure you're, conferring with them on figuring that out also. Again, to review common issue areas. So if you're talking about designing a project, what is common in the class of 2026, we had 6 projects each where the primary issue area was on affordable housing and criminal justice reform. And criminal justice reform also includes like expungement, record clearing, reentry, parole support, prisoners' rights, etc. We had 4 each that had primary issue area in education and special education, disability rights, and children and youth, and 3 each where their primary designation was as a healthcare medical legal partnership, veterans' rights, prisoners' rights, and domestic violence. So just as an example, this does shift a little bit from year to year. And we had in the past, many years where we had a lot of projects in immigration law. This year we have a couple. I think it's like 2 in immigration law, but certainly not as many. In prior years, we've had fewer housing projects, and this year we have more. So it really does change over time. I can take a break for questions on project design.
Fantastic. Yes. We do have some more eligibility questions. We'll save those for later, for the end of the call. But an attendee asked, are organizations that have previously received funding usually more successful applicants? And if so, why? And
Yeah, that's a good question. It's not a requirement. I mean, I think if an organization has hosted a lot of fellows, then that probably means they're like comfortable doing it. I would say some of the larger organizations in larger cities are also more well known to the sponsors that you want to be working with, right? So I support a lot of folks in Boston and New York. In Boston, the largest legal aid is Greater Boston Legal Services. They're well known by kind of everyone in the legal community and have had a lot of fellows over the years and are well placed to like develop projects, support projects. They have the infrastructure, they have the training, they have the supervision for it. But every year we have organizations that maybe have never sponsored before or only sponsored 1 or 2. It's not a requirement. I think then again, keeping in mind the audience that you're ultimately writing for, like showing throughout the course of the application that this host organization is going to be one that can support you, that can support the work of the project, that makes a lot of sense and is going to make a lot of impact.
thank you so much. Yes. Someone else asked, I recently saw that a current fellow is doing essentially the same project that I was hoping to propose, same state, different organization. Does that decrease my chances of being sponsored or selected for a fellowship?
That's a good question. So as I said, I support a lot of folks in the Northeast, which is New York and Boston, and I'm based in DC. And those are pretty saturated legal markets, well, like relatively, right? There's always more need, and there's never enough public interest attorneys to fill it, but there are relatively a lot of organizations in the area. So if you are proposing a project that's similar to things that other people have done before, especially in the same city, I think you really need to make sure you're making clear why it's different, right? The distinguishability. So why is the work that you're bringing to this different than what's already going on? Because if there's someone on the interview panel who knows that other organization and is aware of that other fellow's work, they might say like, this doesn't seem very like distinct. This isn't very different. This is already going on. And, what it's not going to be that different. What's the impact? So just something to think about there with similar types of work. Not to say it can't happen, but just I think being thoughtful when you're designing the application. And it could be that your host organization, right? You're gonna expand this work to a different community. Maybe the current fellow is working in community X, and you want to do it for community Y. That's a great way to distinguish and show that the work is still
needed. Just 2 more questions I think maybe we can address here. Following up on the DEI part that you had mentioned, how do you know your sponsor how do you know who your sponsor might be? Is it state specific? And how do we know if sponsors are politically aligned with our projects?
So that's a good question. The answer is you don't know, because we have in our model we have our whole pool of applications, and then sponsors tell us the types of projects that we're looking for, and then we match them up, and they'll select to interview projects that meet those criteria. Um, from there. And then typically sponsors are seeing, anywhere from 5 to 10 applications. They're maybe interviewing 3 to 5 candidates, and then they're picking one. And it could be all over the country. In larger legal markets, it's more likely that you're going to have sponsors who are based in that city or have an office in that city. In some of the more rural communities or states with smaller legal markets, they might be from different parts of the country. So I think it's something you have to think about with your host organization is like, what kind of audience are you writing for? And who might be supporting the project. I think it's always good to look at who already supports the host organization. So who do they already do pro bono with? Who are the folks that are, on their board or doing projects with them? And that can give you a good idea of the support that they already have.
And just one more question for this portion. Should we avoid designing a project in the common issue areas we receive?
I don't think there's a reason to avoid it. I think if it's a strong project, it's going to more likely to be seen. The number one thing that I always say to folks is that the project you propose needs to be really strongly aligned in all of these areas, right? So it needs to make sense for you to do at this organization, at this time, in this format. And if that's one of the more common areas, fine, that's great. Like it's something that you need to be able to, the whole application materials need to be able to show that. I think sometimes people maybe try too hard and kind of fit it like a square peg in a round hole. And, I don't think that you want to do that either.
Right. And we'll aim to address the pending questions later on in the presentation.
Okay, yes. Okay, so I do want to talk, often folks will ask about how to pair up together between candidates and host organizations. So some of you may have already done this, but if you haven't already, of course, starting with folks you've already worked with. So current and prior internships or jobs that you've had either in law school or before law school, or if you are a host organization. I'm not sure if we have any on this call, but certainly looking at your pool of interns, prior employees. If you have anyone who went to law school about 2 years ago, now's the time. They're about ready to apply. So think about that. Please, please, please talk to your law school advisors. I will confess, I was not a big user of my law school's career center when I was in law school. And then I went and became one after law school. And I was like, oh, this would have been helpful. I should have talked to them more. So please do consider talking to a law school career center, especially if they have someone who does public interest advising. They're really going to be a great resource. Also, if there's folks who do experiential learning, if you've got someone who directs that program or possibly in the clinics, if you've worked in clinics or co-ops, those are going to be great sources of referrals for you about places that might be a good host organization. You can look for alumni, right? If you're at a law school that has had alum from your school, usually our fellows love when people reach out to them and ask them about it. So if you find them on LinkedIn or a website search or something like that, feel free to reach out to them. If you haven't already, please make sure you look at psjd.org. So that's publicservicejd.org. That is a free website. That is a big database for public interest jobs all years. So if you're still, looking for future years, please check it out. Organizations will post there sometimes that they're looking for interns or they're looking for people to propose with them. A lot of those deadlines, some of them may have passed already. A lot of them are probably coming up if they're already online, if you haven't done that already. And then some organizations will also post on their websites. So be sure to check those out. Of course, use your networks. this slide is more aimed towards host organizations, but be looking for solicitations. And if you're a candidate, you can be looking for like solicitations for candidates as well. And sometimes it'll be like a project-based fellowship. So they'll say, Equal Justice Works or a SCADN fellow. We know many people apply to both, so that might be common language that you're looking for in those posts. I think when you're looking at your host organization, a potential host organization, some things to think about. So keep in mind, they're going to be your employer. We're not the employer. The host organization is the full-time employer for 2 years of that fellowship. So, what is their work culture like? How do they like to supervise and train folks? Are they hybrid? Are they in person? How big is it? What's the size of the unit? What are hours like? Office culture, pay. Is there a union? Are fellows a part of that union? Like, what does that look like? What's paid leave? And if you're able to talk to other folks that have worked there, or again, talk to your advisors and other people who are in the network, they might know, if that organization has a reputation for like being great for young attorneys, or maybe it's a hard place for young attorneys. I would do as much as you can to figure that out. It's not to say that you have to work somewhere, propose a project where somewhere you've worked before. It helps, but it's not a requirement. And there's certainly successful fellows who are at host organizations who have never worked together before. So just something to think about. I'm going to go through tips on submitting a strong application as well. So assemble a team. Our applications are pretty long. They're pretty robust. It's a lot of different pieces. It's not just a standard job application. It's kind of like a job application / grant proposal / business plan. And so it's great to have a review team. Of course, you want to have representatives from your host organization. So the proposed supervisor, relevant leadership. So like the executive director has to sign, certification forms. In our application, it is collaborative between you and the host organization. So there's parts of it the host organization has to be filling out themselves. If they've got a pro bono coordinator, please make sure you talk to that person and loop them in. They're going to have great insight for you, again, on like what are the types of things that firms and legal departments maybe like to do with them already, that might be a good fit for a new project that you're proposing. What's the kinds of concerns that they see with those organizations? Law school advisors again. So look at career services. If you go to public interest or pro bono center, or externship, experiential learning, those are all great folks. Clinical professors, all great folks to be involved and help review your project design. And then alumni and mentors. So this could again be Equal Justice Works alumni. Could be other project-based fellows. If someone's done a fellowship before, they might be able to give you good advice. Practitioners in the field. So again, if you've had internships you've worked at, or people you've worked in coalitions with, or prior jobs with, can all be great sources to help you as you're reviewing. And I would say suggesting that you're asking for folks to kind of help you review and refine the project proposal. You want to make sure you're understanding the application. So it is submitted entirely online and submittable, which is linked from our website on the main page for the applications. Please go ahead, create an account now. You can familiarize yourself with with the content. The host organization and the candidate do co-create one application. There's input from multiple folks that are needed, so make sure to give yourself plenty of time. And ultimately, the candidate is submitting that application. The parts of the application, you can also see a blank application on our website, which has this as well, so you can see how it's laid out there. But there's basic information. There's kind of a personal statement, or like why this fellowship. We do ask for a resume. Again, we don't ask for GPA or transcripts. In the proposal narrative, this has been updated a little bit this year. It's going to look different from how it has in years past. The goal is to really align it across our fellowship programs. ultimately we feel like this hopefully doesn't change, this does not change the types of projects that we're looking for. It's just kind of a different way of talking about it. But there's a statement of need, there's a project description, there's goals, there's a work plan, a timeline, potential sponsor, and pro bono opportunities. Those are all in there. Information from the host organizations includes like what's their structure, what's their supervision, what's their history, and then there's a few other things as well. We do ask for 2 letters of recommendation to be submitted, so something to be thinking about. Applications are due mid-September, September 17th. So if you're thinking about asking like law professors, for example, or clinical professors, you want to make sure you're giving them plenty of time. Summer is, time for vacations, so make sure you're planning ahead for that. Tips for writing a competitive application. So again, it's different than a standard job application. It's more like a grant proposal or a business plan. Keep in mind that audience, which is the sponsors. So again, someone who is passionate about public interest or pro bono, doesn't do it as their day job, but is really excited to be involved and wants to support this kind of work. Rely on that review team. So, professors, host organization staff, career services, any other folks who are getting involved. Make sure, you're timing that out for review. Really focus on the fit. So again, your unique ability to bring the right project at the right time with the right organization. Like, why does this all make a lot of sense and is super aligned? And make sure you're checking out and utilizing the resources on our website. A few kind of common application mishaps, I would say, some proposals that are over ambitious or unrealistic, or just kind of do one thing that might be quite not enough to make a meaningful project. Understanding the legal services provider landscape and project potential community partners. I touched on this a little bit earlier when I was talking about kind of larger legal markets where there's a lot of folks who are already working. I think it's really important to do a little bit of like mapping, I would think, and you can literally like put it down like on a piece of paper or on a digital screen or something like that. But think about for this project that you're designing, like who are the organizations that are already doing this work or similar work, and how are they related? Like if you needed to refer someone for this specific type of legal issue, who would you refer them to? Can you figure that out? Who are the community partners? Like where does this fit? Because that's going to help make it really clear on why the project you're proposing is really important and really meets an unmet need. Make sure you're writing a good amount of information. You don't want to neglect the pro bono opportunities section. So we have a special document about this on our website. It's called developing pro bono opportunities. We really recommend you provide a menu of opportunities for folks to get involved with. That's something our sponsors are really, really typically looking for. You want to make sure your personal statement or kind of why a fellowship makes sense. And yeah, definitely make sure you're avoiding typos, spelling or grammatical errors. Because it's a lot of lawyers who are reading this. And if you have gone to law school or worked with lawyers, you know that lawyers are really annoying about typos and grammar. They will notice if there is a typo. So you want to make sure you're giving yourself plenty of time to review and catch those. I do recommend drafting your application outside of the portal, in a Word document, and then putting it into the portal once it's been reviewed and you're sure it's in good shape. Okay, what next? So we'll do this and then we'll go on to questions. So again, our applications are open now. This is our application website, which I'll also link in the chat. This is the page with kind of all of our resources. You can find all of our applications under the resources heading. Lots of information there. This is a little bit of an older screenshot. I think the application button is also right there too, like submit now to submittable. So to link to the submittable link is there now. So make sure you're referring back to that. Just quickly noting, application closes on September 27th. Then around October, we'll have fellowship alumni who review the applications. This is for qualitative kind of purposes. They'll give us some feedback on applications that they think are strong. Then going into the next year, so starting around November, we put together what we call the slate of candidates, so that packet of materials that's going to the sponsors. They're choosing who they want to interview and then selecting their candidate, their fellows. Um, if you're selected for an interview, we love to see folks do, a mock interview. That's a great way to prepare. We anticipate that the selection process will close next spring, so definitely by May, we'll announce the fellowship class. Fellows, if you're taking the bar, you might be taking the bar exam, and then in September of 2027, fellows will begin work at their host organizations. So that's high level. So what should you be doing now? Obviously, you want to be creating your account in submittal, enter your basic information, developing your project proposal. Think about requesting letters of recommendation. I don't think you need to do this now. Typically, you want to give that recommender a basic, like at least an outline of your proposal and an updated resume, personal statement. I would say it's a little bit early to be finalizing those, but you should certainly be planning and making a timeline to do all of these things. Make a plan for your final review and submission. Again, noting you and the candidates and host organizations both have to submit information, and make sure you're giving yourselves plenty of time to do that, working on vacations, etc. Okay, and now we'll take questions.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much for that, Lauren. And thanks for everybody's patience. We're going to get to clearing some of the older pending questions. Someone asked, can you work for a public defender, but in a role that is not standard in their practice?
Yes, so you can. It does need to be a 501c3 or a 501c4 organization. So that's a bit of a tax status question. And again, it would need to be not standard public defense. So we've had many fellows for over the years, for example, at the Bronx Defenders. If you're looking at that type of work, I would suggest looking at our fellow archive and looking at the host organizations for folks who have been at the Bronx Defenders.
Perfect. That's a good question. What happens if a fellow does not pass the bar exam?
Yeah, so that is ultimately up to the fellow and their employer, who is the host organization. We definitely encourage that fellows get another chance to take the bar exam. Ultimately, it is up to the employer. So it's something you should talk about with the host organization ahead of time. Like, do they have a policy around retaking the bar? What does that look like? Obviously, we don't want folks to leave their host organization. It does happen from time to time, and we try to support fellows then in maybe transferring to a different organization, but it is challenging for everyone involved. So talk to your host organization ahead of time.
Right. Someone asked, organizations affiliated with law schools are not eligible, right? That's not the case. We definitely have law school clinics have fellow applicants apply. It is a bit trickier with just normal university bureaucracy. So, really paying close attention to that host certification form as far as the application process goes is going to be vital, and just making sure that, the law school is willing to sign off on all of the sort of terms that come with hosting a fellowship in advance.
Yeah. And just again, noting that clinic needs to be its own 501c3 or 501c4.
That's right. And then in the chat, we have if the host organization is a national nonprofit with offices throughout the country, is there a strategy for which state to apply for EJW's purposes?
No, I've worked with a number of fellows who have been at national organizations, and often it depends on the type of work, but if it's like national, like ACLUs or NAACP-LDFs, they're often working in a few different states. So typically what they'll do is in the proposal, talk about, what the issue they're looking to address is, and then name a few states where they anticipate that they would be working, with the understanding that that might change. If you're working in an organization that's like national but has local offices, then your work is going to be more local. So that's kind of the main thing I think about there.
Thank you very much. Yeah. And so someone asked if host organizations are interviewed as part of the process. That is not the case for the interview process. So it's just all the more important that host organizations are looped in the application process, and that they're really conveying everything that they want to be elevated to sponsors ahead of interviews. There is someone in the chat that I want to try to allow to speak. So I'm going to invite you to speak, Gene. Um, so please feel welcome to talk through your question. And you'll need to come off mute. I did enable your ability to speak, but I think you'll need to locally. Uh, there you are. Perfect.
Sorry, I didn't have a particular question. Was I raising my hand?
Oh, apologies. Sorry to call you out.
Sorry.
Yes,
That's
no
on me.
worries. Great. Well, we have just a couple more in the chat here too. A specific instance here, I'm graduating in December this year and will be taking the bar in February 2027. Is it possible to start the fellowship earlier than September 2027? And that
Unfortunately, no. Yeah, all of our candidates start in September for the Design Your Own Fellowship program.
that's right.
If you are graduating a little bit earlier, you could keep an eye out on the cohort programs because they have a rolling application deadline and might be looking for folks to start sooner. I think Al could talk more to this, but
Yeah.
now is probably a little bit too soon for that if you're going to be taking the February bar exam. But you could keep an eye out coming months.
That's right. Yeah. And things do operate on a case-by-case basis with host organizations' willingness to take on fellows prior to bar admission. So that would be identified in the application process and the in subsequent interview processes. Right now, as I mentioned, we have 4
For the
active
cohort
positions
programs, I was saying
for the
he's
cohort,
talking
yeah,
about for the cohort
specifically for the cohort programs. And right now we have 4 active recruiting cohort fellowship positions. And in the chat, you can find a link to that I posted earlier. We are anticipating up to 9 additional positions being posted next month in support of our financial empowerment project. So stay tuned to that webpage for those when those become available. And I think this is our final question here. So just a follow-up question to a previous answer, if applying for a law school clinic, the law school has to be a 501c3, and the clinic itself needs to be its own separate 501c3.
So your employer, who is the non would be the clinic, I would assume in this scenario, needs to be a 501c3.
Right.
Their greater relationship with the university we don't care as much about, but that is something I would especially if they've never hosted a fellow before. University bureaucracies are large and tend to move slowly, so I would just be really certain that you have those questions figured out, and the employer certification form, talking to like the director of the clinic and all of the legal counsel that they're going to need to get to sign like ahead of time. Start early.
That's right. And we do have also, in addition to the applicant guide that we've mentioned, a host organization guide on our main website landing page. So I would just refer to that for eligibility criteria for host organizations. And as you see here on the screen, any questions that are outstanding or that aren't addressed by our resources, please do feel welcome to reach out to fellowships at equaljusticeworks.org, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Well, we are past time. Thank you all again very much for joining us. Wishing you all the best of luck in the process, and hope you participate, and hope to see you all again sometime soon.
Great, thank you all.
Take care.